Well, I'm going to begin, Sally, by asking, did it feel like this project almost felt, in some regards, almost like going back to basics in some ways, or kind of reminder of why you love this craft? Because this feels like such a director and actor's project, sort of quite sort of single setting, shot over quite a short period of time, almost in some ways akin to a stage play.
I wrote it really as a film. But of course, cinema shares some of the long roots with dramatic form, with theatre. And this indeed is based on character, plot, real time, one situation, going deep rather than going wide, let's say, no special effects, just the crises of these individuals and how they're dealing with them.
Yeah, did it ever cross your mind at any stage to do this as a play, or was it always, right from the offset, always going to be a piece for cinema?
It was always going to be a piece for cinema. I think it was about having a very, for example, intimate camera that goes really close to people and examines every nuance of what they're feeling and thinking, and that's not possible in the theatre where you're further away. Having said that, there's been a lot of interest in turning it into a play that way round, but it was really and truly conceived as a sort of bare bones film, absolutely forward to basics rather than back to basics, but to the essence of really what's possible on the screen.
I mean, obviously the runtime's quite modest length. I think it's 71 minutes, I think. And I mean, was there ever any pressure on you to have it be longer? But I mean, I saw it at Berlin Film Festival, and I can tell you right now, 70 minutes at a film festival is an absolute joy. Because I mean, for a theatrical release, that is generally quite considered to be quite short.
Yeah, well, distributors love the fact that it's shorter because it means they can show it more times during the day. I've never yet heard anyone complain about a film being too short, but I've heard many people complain about other films being too long. I think all of our time is of the essence. We all lead very busy lives, and we're inundated with material to look at, whether it's the news or more films or whatever. So I think brevity is a real advantage. And comic timing is all about just keeping quite fast, quite speedy, quite sharp, not lingering, and keeping things moving forward.
And what's the decision behind the monochrome aesthetic in this instance?
I find that black and white is more colourful, because you can really fill the spaces of shadow, of deep blacks and of bright whites with your, in a way, imaginative and emotional colour, rather than being flooded with something in the guise of realism, almost too much information. So again, it takes it back to this sort of skeletal feeling, this very primal feeling of the image.
And there were sort of shades in there of Mike Leigh. I think obviously Abigail's Party was something that sprung to mind, and there's Alan Ayckbourn as well. What would you say were your biggest kind of influences, or when it came to writing this project?
Listening to people everywhere, listening to people on the tube, listening to people in the street, listening to people I've met, listening to people in my imagination who I've never met. And I think that was the real influence, was having my ear to the ground, these kind of rumblings of discontent in the UK.
Because obviously this came out at a time when in the UK left-wing politics was sort of in turmoil, and it was all quite farcical. But then after this movie, obviously there was quite a strong election campaign. I mean, if you'd written this now, do you think it would be quite a different movie?
Possibly, but I tried to write it in such a way that it would be universally applicable rather than tied into particular momentary political events, given that politics can happen so fast and change so fast. But I think the underlying themes, betrayal, friendship, love and war, if you like, within a marriage, and ideals that crumble in the face of crisis, and really the problem of how to tell the truth. So these are things that were the stuff of Greek tragedy, and will always be the stuff of human drama. So I think that was the idea. But yeah, of course, when you write something, you're writing at a particular political and social moment, and so all of that is going to infect what you're writing and how you're writing. So possibly it would have been different now, but it feels very relevant to right now.
And obviously, I mean, the Brexit results came out during the course of the shoot. But how much of an impact did that have on the production? I mean, considering, because obviously, even though it's kind of underlying, there is a real kind of political edge to this movie.
There is. It's a political comedy. but it's politics in the broadest sense as well as in the sense of parliamentary politics, and that in fact that's one of the things the characters talk about, is how much do we believe in democracy anymore. Not that there's a better system, but the fact of the Brexit vote happening halfway through our very minimal 2-week shoot really just gave an emotional tone, I think, to it. It didn't change the script. The script was there already. Everything was written. But I think it helped the actors to feel that there was an urgency in this feeling, that this metaphorical civil war, if you like, that's happening in a microcosm within people's relationships, within people's own selves, but which is reflected in the broader society as this indication of deep divisions came to light.
I mean, obviously you mentioned, I mean, they're kind of analysing of the democracy. They speak about that sort of theme in this movie. But do you find that currently democracy has been threatened in this country, or just in the world, so thanks to sort of social media and this kind of culture of fake news that's kind of now exists?
Well, the problem of how you define what's true, whether it's on the world stage, in the news, or in people's lives, is perennial. I mean, it's if you like, it's a kind of philosophical question, ultimately, subjective truth, objective truth, but it's become a massive, massive political weapon, the dissemination of untruth, real factual untruth. So the subject is there. Whether it's threatening democracy is another matter. But, for example, this referendum, which was really virtually 50-50 and of a relatively small portion of the population, makes you wonder, well, who is being represented finally by the decision?
And obviously, when I mentioned I saw this in Berlin and it got a great reaction. As a filmmaker, it must be so great when you make, well, nerve-wracking in some ways when you do a comedy, because you kind of find out instantly how it's being perceived. Because if you make a good drama, you can't really tell necessarily from the audience how the reception to the movie. Whereas with a comedy, they're either laughing or they're not. And what's that like when you watch a film in a big crowd that you've written, where you can kind of tell on the spot if it's going down well?
It's wonderful. It's really an incredible feedback, validation, laughter, because you know that people are feeling something in their body. They're really responding honestly. People don't fake laughter. So if you sit in the cinema and you sort of feel the ground vibrate underneath because people are sort of shaking with laughter, it's a wonderful feeling.
And just finally, because your films, generally speaking, are sometimes sort of maybe 4 years apart. Do you have to wait that long for the next one?
Well, it's not waiting from my point of view. It's because I write everything. And if you're a writer-director, the longest period of time really is the writing. Everything's based on the writing. So I never stop. It's just that the results come every 3 to 4 years, because that's how long the cycle is of writing. Tiny sprint of shooting, long edit, and then bringing it out.
So have you started working on the next one already?
I've got 2 scripts ready.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey,